but I do want to talk about a hot button issue: arming teachers.
Oh yeah.
I've recently had a conversation with Phil Smith. He's the president of the National African American Gun Association, and he went on for a little bit talking about how we need to arm churches, we need to arm schools, teachers, etc. And I had a few people in the comment section being like, "Hey, I'm with everything that he's saying, but I don't think teachers should be armed." And I almost feel like they misunderstand the statement,
Yeah.
where it's like we want to force these teachers. We're gonna strap them up. Like, here's your duty weapon. Here's your Glock, and go out there and save those kids, buddy. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. Where are you? If a teacher doesn't want to be armed, they're not going to be armed. Like, you can't force anyone to pick up a
No.
gun.
That's the
Talk about
first
this.
thing I yeah. And this one I have a lot of experience on. Because I used to teach teachers concealed carry classes for free. Because my state actually allows for armed teachers in school, and it's basically how it is: if you have a concealed weapons permit and you would like to carry your gun to work, you carry your gun to work. That's all it is. I always got to specify. Very first thing is it's voluntary. It's 100% voluntary. It's not mandatory. No one would ever want to arm all teachers. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's not for everybody. I mean, psychologically, emotionally, it's not for everybody. But here's the thing: I guarantee in every single school in America, there's at least one or two or three people who are capable and intelligent, and they've got training and they've got a background in this stuff. Let that guy be armed. Let that woman be armed. Um, an example I like to use is back when I was teaching teachers. I had a principal and a couple of his teachers and a janitor uh, bus driver came to my class, and they had an event that a student had gotten real violent, had been armed, and the teachers dealt with it, and the school resource officer, the cop, was not there. So the teachers, the unarmed teachers, had to deal with the situation. It worked out, but it scared the heck out of them. And so this principal at that point said, "Look, it's legal for us to have concealed carry in schools here. I don't want to be unprepared and have kids get hurt because I wasn't protecting them." So he went out and he got a couple other teachers that he knew and trusted as being people that were squared away, and they came and took my class. And in fact, the janitor was a recently returned. He was a young guy. He was a recently returned Iraq War vet. I mean, so this guy had combat experience. This guy had extensive training provided by the government. Um, why wouldn't I want this guy armed in my kid's school in case something horrible happens? And one of the things I got to specify is like in Utah, they're not cops. They're not searching lockers. They're not, doing anything. They're not arresting people. No, you don't even know they're armed. They have a gun. It's under their clothing. No one ever sees it. The only time the gun ever comes out is if it's a life or death situation. Um, and we see people all the time. They'll get all hysterical about this. And they'll be like, "Oh, if you have guns in school, then it's going to be like murder and chaos, and teachers are going to be shooting students if they get lippy, and they're going to be shooting people over parking lot spaces." And it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
We've
no,
had it for over a decade.
that's actually been a big concern with a certain a section of my audience who they're very aware and conscious of some of the issues between, more specifically, black students living in a world that doesn't quite understand them because they're from different environments or whatever the reason is. Um, and the question has always been like, hey, we see this situation where this one teacher literally locked a kid out in the cold for several hours. Now, well, what if you gave that teacher a gun? Would that student be dead? Or all it takes is this is one of the more valid arguments that I heard, which maybe you can debunk if you want to, which is all it takes is one teacher to mess around and kill a kid or even injure a kid, and it will shut the whole thing down. Now, to this
Yeah.
point, in Texas, we also have what's called the Guardian program. I think you mentioned it loosely in the book, where if basically the school district says go for it, teachers can either generally they can be armed, sometimes through a program or however it's done. And there's teachers literally in my area, I think they're more private school teachers who can go through PPO programs and become armed. And people like that PPO being like level 4 security, personal protection officer, which kind of gives them some additional education and some additional training, which is I think important but I know you personally have said like, hey, some of the barriers, like forcing them to get anything more than a license to carry, you think maybe kind of silly. But before we address that, could you address the thought of some of the racial tension between teachers and
Yeah.
or uh, one teacher messes up and it's over for everybody?
Yeah, because you're going to have bad actors. You're going to have some people that are just flawed people who are just bad people in any field of endeavor. It's kind of like cops. You can have 100 cops who are great and don't do anything wrong, and then you have one guy who is a scumbag and causes all sorts of troubles. Teachers, yeah, it's the same thing. You're going to have teachers who are just jerks or just dirtbags, and we see it all the time. And it doesn't even involve guns, but there'll be like horrible things. You have teachers who will take advantage of kids, in ways I don't want to. This we're talking guns. I don't want to get into this other stuff, but there are going to be bad actors. But you got to weigh basically the cost, the pros and the cons. And if you have somebody who's truly violent and dangerous, and whether it's a racial tension thing or it's a class thing or the guy is just a psycho, you could have abusive and dangerous teachers. And honestly, there's nothing stopping that guy from being armed anyway. Like if he is truly like breaking the law and he's a bad dude, it doesn't matter. Bad dude's going to have a gun, because he doesn't care.
Yeah,
So honestly, to me, that's one where you got to weigh the costs. It's like yeah, cops suck, or one cop sucks, 100 cops are good, but that one cop causes all this trouble. Do I want to remove the other 100 cops, off the street? Because what's that do? And so to me, the
right.
teacher thing is if you have a teacher who is armed and abuses that at all, fire them. They shouldn't be a teacher to begin with. They need to be out of there. I think the main thing you need to do as far as concealed carry in schools is just amend your employment agreement to say if you ever produce this gun for any situation that's not life or death, legal use of force, you're gone forever. You're fired for eternity. Get out. Pack your crap. Doors that way. Um, because honestly, this is it's a cost benefit analysis. So we're truly worried about protecting these kids. We're truly worried about protecting these places that are defenseless, hunting preserves the innocent. Then you got to put something there to protect them.
Yeah,
And if you're not willing to put something there to protect them, then we're just paying lip service to this whole thing, and we're sticking a. And then they come along and they want to do gun control afterwards, like sticking a band-aid on a sucking chest wound.
yeah,
You got to stop it from occurring. So yeah, I mean that is a valid point. There are power tripping teachers. I had a terrible school. I grew up in California public schools, Junior Gladiator Academy for gifted drive-by shooters. Okay,
woo,
I mean my school sucked,
yeah.
and yeah, Merced, go Merced Bears.
Go Merced,
But
woo.
yeah, and so it's changed a lot, but my thing is, yeah, you're going to have bad apples in any endeavor, but you got to, if it's worth it to defend the kids from the worst possible thing that can happen, then it's worth it.
Yeah,
You know, that's to me, but I think that's a valid concern. But if you look at people who conceal weapon permit carriers are actually the single most law abiding demographic there is in America. We beat pretty much everything else. And it's interesting because that's permit holders so it's not religious, it's not racial, it's not sociological, there's not a income difference. It's the people who have chosen to take this extra step to defend themselves, that gun, that people of the gun culture. It's very rare that any concealed weapons permits get, I mean they get revoked for criminal stuff, but it's rare. And it's almost never that they use their gun to do something bad. It's more like tax evasion or
yeah.
something stupid.
Something white collar and yeah.
Yeah,
So
they got caught doing something stupid.
yeah, yeah, which is unfortunate. But I think you've said some really interesting points, and I can appreciate um, the individual who has the motivation to say like, hey, I want to do this the right way. I've met many people who are perfectly capable of going and buying a gun. This is Texas right now. We have constitutional carry, thank goodness, because it wasn't like that when I first moved here.
That's awesome.
And the interesting thing is, I know a lot of people who are perfectly able to go pass a background check, have a firearm, go train, but they're like, I want to do it the right way. I want to get my license to carry. I'm like, okay, cool, that's fine too. I mean, I'll get the gun, just make sure you have it, and but you can get your license to carry. That's awesome. Go ahead and do you, fam. But the thought that like, hey, these people they're submitting themselves for background checks in Texas, you got to be fingerprinted, which is an additional step. Like, what person who is intent on doing criminal acts is saying, oh, let me go get fingerprinted, make it easier to get caught? That's generally not the case.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to do something illegal or violent, you're going to do it anyways. And I'm not saying, like you said, that there aren't going to be some teachers or individuals who would go too far with their evil, but those people are going to commit evil anyways. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't really going to make that much of a difference. Hopefully not. I think the evidence will show as more time goes on, and I'm hoping and praying that it does not show itself in an ugly way. I really don't want to see that, especially because this is for the kids. It's for
Yeah.
the kids.
And like I said, we're Utah. It makes for a good experiment. People always like to talk about follow the science. Okay, so we got
Right.
we got a perfectly good experiment here that we've been doing for almost 20 years, and it's not been the nightmare that they said it was going to be. And we have had incidences that armed teachers have stopped. We had an attempted kidnapping I wrote about in the book,
You did.
where somebody tried to kidnap a kid from school, and an armed teacher stopped him. So we've actually had incidences that show that honestly it's a net positive. And so, yeah, I'm a big advocate for allowing guns in school.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's the more that the government makes some places gun free and other places okay, the more problems it's going to cause, and the more people aren't going to carry anywhere because they don't want to get in trouble with the law. But think about it, who doesn't want to get in trouble with the law? Law-abiding people.
Right.
If you're a crook, you don't care. I mean, who cares?